Welcome back. You're watching One on One. We're talking with mind-body expert Dr. Deepak Chopra. Dr. Chopra, who are the people who've influenced you personally? Who are the mentors or role models you've looked to?
Well, I think the most important mentors were my parents. My father, who was an army cardiologist, but he was also a really loving and compassionate healer. When he was in the army, 5 days a week, he used to see soldiers, but then on the weekends he'd see civilian patients. He wouldn't charge them. They would come from all over the country to see him. My mother would cook the food for these patients, and before they left, they would make sure that they had enough money for their bus or their train so they could get home. And they would even buy them the medicines, you know, the prescriptions, because these were poor patients. I remember when we left this small town in India called Jabalpur, because my father was posted to another place, there were 10,000 people on the railway station just to see him off. Such was their gratitude to him. So he was a great mentor. My mother was a great mentor. And when I was growing up, you know, there was always talk of Mahatma Gandhi, Mr. Nehru as the great visionary leaders of our times. Then I had mythical beings as my role models, whether it was Hanuman or Ram or, you know, some story from the great mythology of India. And even though at a subtle level I knew that these people were part of our collective imagination, they still stirred my soul in a certain way. As I grew up and became aware of what was happening in the rest of the world, Martin Luther King became one of the greatest mentors in his life, and then Nelson Mandela. I could say those are people I've learned a lot from.
You've achieved celebrity and fame, and people know you and they turn to you, and a lot of celebrities come to you looking for advice. How has that changed, or perhaps you know, altered the way you look at celebrity and fame?
Well, one thing I've learned to distinguish in my own life is, and it's very important for our children to learn that, is that, you know, there's a difference between being a celebrity and a hero. And in our culture, we've created heroes out of celebrities. And that's created a really false mythology, so to speak. The mythology of Hollywood has overtaken the authentic mythology that comes from a deep spirituality. And I think I have realized that celebrities are actually the most insecure people in the world. In fact, they're only as secure as their last movie or their last song, and they constantly live on the edge of fear, and they should be our last role models.
How have your children, your son Gautam and your daughter Malika, and your wife and your family in general related to your celebrity and fame?
I think they constantly remind me that I shouldn't take myself too seriously, you know. So even if I'm on the cover of Time magazine or something, my children will laugh and say, you know, they made a mistake.
How do you balance that, though? Because it's also necessary to get feedback, to know that what you're doing is appreciated or is going well.
You get feedback, but, you know, I think it's important to distinguish between feedback and being immune to criticism as well as to flattery. If you're not doing that consciously, then you're at the mercy of every critic on the street, and you'll never be able to accomplish anything. You know, when I started doing what I was doing, everybody attacked me, and there were, you know, very harsh critics, particularly from my own colleagues, and that was very hurtful. But at a certain point, I decided, you know, I would stay open to feedback to make sure I was doing the right thing. But as long as I was convinced that I was doing the right thing, I would stay.
Being as prolific as you are as an author and someone who really does promulgate this idea of holistic health, how do you avoid the danger of becoming over-commercialized? You know, Deepak Chopra is everywhere, basically.
You know, I've wondered about the sources of money and wealth and power through the ages, and, you know, looked at how at one time when we were hunter-gatherers, money was all hunting and gathering. In the age of agriculture, wealth was from the soil. In the age of industry, it was machines. Today, it's a microchip, a piece of information on a piece of silicon dust. I think as we move to a knowledge-based society, and ultimately, I hope, a wisdom-based society, then the only way to generate wealth should be the way I do it.
Now, how do you balance then the fact that you can make money, you can achieve, you know, like financial security and wealth, and you have the right to enjoy it, but how do you balance that with the message that you're putting out that's saying, well, materialism isn't everything?
No, I think it's what you do with the wealth and also how you're attached to it. And at this moment, I would say that, you know, Even though a lot of money comes my way, a lot goes out into various ventures and non-profit organizations and various endeavors. I'm involved with something, the founder and president of something called the Alliance for a New Humanity, and I literally pour out more than I gain, and I'm not an accumulator. I don't have an affluent lifestyle. The only thing that I do, which might be affluent, is I travel first class because I travel a lot. But I don't live in an ostentatious or wealthy surroundings. Don't drive an expensive car. In fact, don't drive at all these days because I like to walk the streets of New York and live in a small apartment.
Tell me about the Alliance for Humanity. What is your goal with that?
After 9/11, there was so much talk about terrorist cells in the world, and I said, why not have peace cells in the world? And why not actually see what's really happening in the world, in the areas of ecology, in the areas of conflict resolution, in the area of social justice, and in the area of empowering the poor. These are the four big things in our life, empowerment of the poor in developing countries, social justice, ecology, and conflict resolution. And I found that there was a lot of people doing amazing things. So I said, let's identify them, let's create clusters of them, and let's connect them so that we can tell a new story about our common humanity. As part of it, we joined with Gallup poll. We also did a survey of 600 Muslims in the world. 600,000 Muslims in 7 countries, from Pakistan to Morocco to Iran to Iraq to Saudi Arabia. And we found that the #1 reason for conflict in the world is lack of respect. That you can do anything to a human being, but if you humiliate them and you disrespect them, you will enrage them. And that this was one of the reasons why we have so much conflict right now in the world, is that we are not aware of the values of other people, and we don't recognize that, in fact, some of the values might be much deeper. For example, we asked the Muslims, what did you think about, what did you admire about the West? Well, leadership, imagination, technology, innovation, entrepreneurship, which I think we would all admire about the West. What did you dislike about the West? Well, the way they treat their elderly, the way they disrespect the poor, the way they become ethnocentric and racist and bigoted and influence peddle and say they're supporting democracy, while in fact, they nurture self-interesting tyranny across the world. So, we got a lot of information that will help us to develop good data for conversation.
Do you consider yourself a doctor still, or have you evolved into something else?
I consider myself a healer. And, being a doctor was the beginning, but being a doctor made me a superb technician that knew everything about the human body, and not necessarily a healer, because a healer must know more. What's happening in the mind, what's happening in the emotions, what's happening in the spirit, what's happening in the environment, what's happening in relationships. So I've extended my profession from being a doctor to a healer, I hope.
What's the next step? Where do you evolve down the road?
I think I want, at this point in my life, to contribute to the health of the world through the Alliance for a New Humanity. And our website, by the way, is anhglobal.org, anhglobal.org. And we do simple things like plant trees, so global warming is a fact, and it's more an urgent thing than right now war or terrorism, and we need to address it. The fact that our technologies are going so fast in their evolution will make superpowers irrelevant. I'm told that in 15 years we'll have little handheld computers, and you won't need nuclear weapons and biological warfare. You'll be able to hijack planes just by moving electrons, and you could be sitting anywhere in the world to do it. So as our technologies evolve, superpowers are going to become irrelevant, and there's going to be also the democratization of violence and warfare. And when that happens, we have to look at it. We have to look at ourselves in the world in a new way. The war on terrorism, the war on drugs, the war on poverty, the war on cancer, the war on AIDS, the war on environment, they're all wrong metaphors. We don't need another war. We need creative solutions to heal our world, and that's where my attention is going to be.
With all the work you do you get any chance to relax? I know you're an avid golfer.
I'm playing less and less golf, but I do meditate every day and I do exercise every day, and I walk the streets of New York.
Where will you be down the road in terms of legacy? How would you like to be remembered?
Somebody who was part of a global shift in perspective and change, part of the collective tide of transformation, part of the transition team.
Dr. Deepak Chopra, wish you luck. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Riz. Thank you for having me. Thank you very much.